The Old Man's Secret, a lesson in respect. The sun cast long, golden rays over the quiet streets of Oakwood Hills, painting the neighborhood in soft hues of orange and pink. The air was calm, carrying the familiar scents of home-cooked meals and freshly cut grass. On Maple Street, at the very end of a line of neatly kept houses, stood a modest white home with green shutters that had seen better days. The house belonged to Mr. Elijah Brooks, a man whose life, much like his home, was filled with untold stories and unappreciated strength. Mr. Brooks was a tall black man in his late 70s, his lean frame slightly bent with age. His face bore the deep lines of a life well lived, and his silver hair was always neatly combed, a testament to his pride and discipline. Despite his age, his sharp brown eyes missed nothing. He spent most evenings on his front porch, seated in a rocking chair with a cup of tea in hand, watching the world pass by. The neighborhood adored him. Children waved as they cycled past, and adults often stopped for a quick chat. But to most, he was just Mr. Brooks, the kind, quiet old man who had lived there for decades. They didn't know much about his past, only that he'd served in the military long ago. For Mr. Brooks, that was more than enough. The neighborhood's shadow. Over the past few months, however, a dark cloud had hung over Oakwood Hills. A series of petty crimes had shaken the otherwise peaceful community. It started with small things, missing packages, stolen bikes, but soon escalated. Homes were being broken into, valuables stolen while families were away. The culprits seemed to target the elderly and those who lived alone, making Mr. Brooks a potential victim in the eyes of his concerned neighbors. The neighborhood watch ramped up their efforts, but the thieves remained elusive. Conversations at the local grocery store grew increasingly tense, and suspicion began to cloud the once friendly atmosphere. Mr. Brooks listened to these whispers with a quiet resolve. He'd seen fear like this before, and it never ended well. But he wasn't about to let fear dictate his life. He'd dealt with far worse in his younger days, though few knew just how far back those days reached. One evening, as the streetlights flickered on and the neighborhood settled into its nightly routine, 3 figures appeared at the far end of Maple Street. At the center was Luke, a brash young man with messy blonde hair and a cocky grin. Flanking him were his partners, Travis, stocky and aggressive, and Eddie, wiry with darting eyes that betrayed his constant anxiety. The trio had grown up in a rough part of town, bonding over shared hardships and a mutual disdain for authority. Luke's gaze landed on Mr. Brooks's house. "Check that place out," he said, nudging Travis. "Old man lives alone. Bet he's got some antiques worth a fortune." Eddie hesitated. I don't know, man. This street's too quiet. What if someone's watching?" Luke rolled his eyes. "Relax, Eddie. Quiet is perfect. No one's gonna notice a thing." The 3 stood in the shadows, watching as Mr. Brooks sipped his tea on the porch. They observed his routine, how he'd finish his tea, take a short walk around the block with his cane, and return home just as the sky turned dark. "Tomorrow night," Luke decided, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Will strike when he's out on his walk. Easy pickings." The break-in. The following evening, as planned, Mr. Brooks stepped off his porch for his usual stroll. The trio watched from a distance, waiting until he disappeared around the corner before making their move. Luke and Travis quickly picked the lock on the back door while Eddie kept watch. Once inside, they were struck by the home's simplicity. The furniture was old but well maintained, the shelves lined with books, and the walls adorned with photographs. Luke sneered, "What a boring place. Let's find the good stuff." As they rummaged through drawers and cabinets, Eddie paused to examine a display case on the far wall. It held medals, certificates, and a photograph of a much younger Mr. Brooks in a military uniform, standing tall and proud beside a team of soldiers. Guys," Eddie called, his voice shaky, "you might want to see this." Travis joined him, frowning at the display. "Special Forces? What the hell is that doing here?" Luke laughed, dismissing their concerns. "So what? He's just an old man now. Doesn't mean he's dangerous." But Eddie couldn't shake the unease that crept up his spine. "Maybe we should go. This doesn't feel right. I'd suggest you boys put everything back where you found it." The confrontation. They spun around to find Mr. Brooks standing in the doorway, his cane in one hand and something else in the other, a gleaming badge. "You'll pick the wrong house tonight," he said calmly, his voice steady but filled with an authority that sent chills down their spines. Luke tried to mask his fear with bravado. "What are you going to do, old man? Call the cops?" Mr. Brooks stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Luke's. "I don't need to call anyone. I've dealt with punks like you before, back when the stakes were a lot higher." Travis stepped forward, attempting to intimidate him. "We're not afraid of you." In one swift motion, Mr. Brooks struck the floor with his cane, revealing a hidden compartment in the base. Out slid a small, sleek device, a silent alarm that connected directly to the neighborhood watch. Within seconds, lights began flickering on in houses up and down the street. Shadows moved in the windows as neighbors grabbed their phones and prepared to act. "You should be," Mr. Brooks said simply. The aftermath. By the next morning, the trio's faces were plastered all over the local news thanks to the neighborhood's security cameras and Mr. Brooks' quick thinking. They were arrested within days, their spree of crimes finally brought to an end. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, but more than that, they gained a newfound respect for the quiet old man who had protected their community with such grace and strength. Mr. Brooks returned to his rocking chair, the neighborhood's gratitude showered upon him. For him, it was just another day, another chapter in a life filled with purpose and quiet heroism. As he sipped his tea and watched the children play on Maple Street, he smiled to himself. Some battles are fought on distant shores, while others are won right at home,